The waking brain too has an appetite for the generative chaos that rules in the dream state. Neurons share information by passing chemicals across the uh, sy- across the synaptic gap that connects them, but they also communicate via a more indirect channel. They synchronize their firing rates for reasons that are not entirely understood. Large clusters of neurons will regularly fire at the exact same frequency. Imagine a discordant jazz band, each member following a different time signature and and tempo that suddenly snaps into a waltz at precisely 120 beats per minute. This is what neuroscientists call phase locking. Phase locking. There is a kind of beautiful synchrony to phase locking. Millions of neurons pulsing in perfect rhythm, but the brain also seems to require the opposite. Regular periods of electrical chaos where neurons are completely out of sync with each other. If you follow the various frequencies of brainwave activity with an EEG, the effect is not unlike turning the dial turning the dial on an AM radio. Periods of structured rhythmic patterns interrupted by static and noise. The brain systems are tuned for no noise, but only in controlled bursts. In 2007, Robert Thatcher, a brain scientist at the University of South Florida, decided to study the vacillation between phase lock and noise in the brains of dozens of children. While Thatcher found that the noise periods on average for 55 milliseconds. He also detected statistically significant variation among the children. Some brains had a tendency to remain longer in phase lock. Others Others had noise intervals that regularly approached 60 milliseconds. When Thatcher then compared the brainwave results with the children's IQ scores, he found a direct correlation between the two data sets. Every extra millisecond spent in the chaotic mode added as much as 20 IQ points. Longer spells in phase lock deducted IQ points, though not as dramatically. Teachers study suggests counterintuitive notion. The more disorganized your brain is, the smarter you are. It's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive in part because we tend to attribute the growing intelligence of the technology world with increasingly precise electromechanical choreography. Intel doesn't advertise its latest microprocessors with the slogan every 55 milliseconds our chips erupt into a blizzard of noise. Yet somehow brains that seek out that noise seems to thrive at least by the measure of the IQ test. Science does not yet have a solid explanation for the brain's chaos states, but Thatcher and other researchers believe that the electric noise of the chaos mode allows the brain to experiment with new links between neurons that would otherwise fail to connect in more orderly settings. The phase lock mode, the theory goes, is where the brain executes an established plan or habit. The chaos mode is where the brain assimilates new information, explores strategies for responding to a changed situation. In this sense, the chaos mode is a kind of background dreaming, a wash of noise that makes new connections possible. Even in our waking hours, it turns out our brains gravitate toward the noise and chaos of dreams 55 milliseconds at a time. William James writing in the late William James writing in the late 1880s had no way of measuring synchronized neuron firing, but his description of the highest order of minds captures something of the chaos mode. Instead of thoughts of concrete things patiently following one another, we have the most abrupt crosscuts and transitions from one idea to another. The most rarefied abstractions and discriminations, the most unheard of combinations of elements, a seething cauldron of ideas where everything is fizzling and bobbing about in a state of bewildering activity where partnerships can be joined or loosened in an instant. Treadmill routine is unknown, and the unexpected seems the only law. The act of sexual reproduction is itself a kind of testament to the power of random connections. Even in the most monogamous relationships, the overwhelming majority of non-microscopic life on Earth produces offspring by sharing genes with another organisms. But the evolution of this reproductive strategy remains something of a mystery. It would have been far easier for life to have avoided the complicated genetic exchange of meiosis and fertilization. Think of the elaborate system that the flowering plants had to evolve, luring insects to take on the task of carrying pollen from flower to flower. Reproduction without sex is a simple matter of cloning. You take your own cells, make a copy, and pass that on to your descendants. it doesn't sound like much fun to our mammalian ears, but it's a strategy that has worked very well for billions of years for bacteria. Uh, a sexual reproduction is faster and more energy efficient than the sexual variety. You don't need to go to the trouble of finding a partner in order to create the next generation. If natural selection rewarded organisms exclusively for sheer reproductive power, sexual reproduction might never have evolved. Sexual organisms reproduce on average twice as quickly as their sexual counterparts, in part because without a male-female distinction, every organism is capable of producing offspring directly. But evolution is not just a game of sheer quantity. Overpopulation, after all, poses its own dangers, and a community of organisms with identical DNA makes a prime target for parasites or predators. For these reasons, natural selection also rewards innovation, life's tendency to discover new ecological niches, new sources of energy. This is what Stuart Kaufman recognized when he first formulated the idea of the adjacent possible, that there is something like an essential drive in the biosphere to diversify into new ways of making a living, scrambling together two distinct sets of DNA with each generation made for a far more complicated reproductive strategy, but it paid immense dividends in the rate of innovation. What we gave up in speed and simplicity, we made up for in creativity. The water flea, Daphnia, lives in most freshwater ponds and swamps. Its spasmodic movements in the water are responsible for the flea description. but in reality, Daphnia are tiny crustaceans, no more than a few millimeters long. Under under normal conditions, Daphnia reproduce asexually with females producing a brood of identical copies of themselves in a tiny pouch. In this mode, the Daphnia community is composed entirely of females. This reproductive strategy proves to be stunningly successful. In warm summer months, Daphnia will often be one of the most abundant organisms in a pond ecosystem. But when conditions get tough, when droughts or other ecological disturbances happen, or when winter rolls in, the water fleas make a remarkable transformation. They start producing males and switch to reproducing sexually. In part, this switch is attributable to the stardier eggs produced by sexual reproduction, which are more capable of surviving the long months of winter. But scientists believe that the sudden adoption of sex is also a kind of biological innovation strategy. In challenging times, an organism needs new ideas to meet those new challenges. Reproducing sexually makes perfect sense during prosperous periods. If life is good, keep doing what you are doing. Don't mess with success by introducing new genetic combinations. But when the world gets more challenging, scarce resources, predators, parasites, you need to innovate. And the quickest path to innovation lies in making novel connections. This strategy of switching back and forth between asexual and sexual reproduction goes by the name heterogamy. And while it is unusual, many different organisms have adopted it. Slime molds, algae, and aphids have all evolved heterogeneous reproductive strategies. In each organism, the Daphnia pattern repeats itself. The genetic recombinations of sex emerge when conditions get difficult. Swapping genes with another organism is itself more difficult than simple cloning, but the innovation rewards of sex outweigh the risk of the more stable path. When nature finds itself in need of new ideas, it strives to connect, not protect. The English language is blessed with a wonderful word that captures the power of accidental connection. Serendipity, first coined in a letter written by the English novelist Horace Walpole in 1754. The word derives from a Persian fairy tale titled the three princess of Serendip. The protagonists of which were always making discoveries by accident and sagacity of things they were not in quest of. The contemporary novelist John Barth describes it in nautical terms. You don't reach Serendip by plotting a curse for it. You have to set out in good faith for elsewhere and lose your bearings serendipitously. But serendipity is not just about embracing random encounters for the sheer acceleration of it. Serendipity is built out of happy accidents, to be sure, but what makes them happy is the fact that the discovery you have made is meaningful to you. It completes a hunch. Or opens up a door in the adjacent possible that you had overlooked. You are a geologist randomly exploring the web, and the particular isle of Serendip that you stumble across turns out to be an essay on health care reform. Your discovery may well be interesting and informative, but it will not be truly serendipitous unless it helps you fill in a piece of a puzzle you have been poring over. That's not to say that geologists can only find serendipitous discoveries in text about geology. Quite quite the contrary. In fact, serendipitous serendipitous discoveries often involve exchange across traditional disciplines. Disciplines. Think of the way Kiku's mythic serpent led to a revolution in our inorganic chemistry. It was genuinely serendipitous that Kiku's dreaming brain should conjure up the image of our Ouroboros at that moment. But had Kikul not been wrestling with the structure of the benzene molecule for years, that serpent shape might not have triggered any useful associations in his mind. Sometimes a serpent swallowing its tail is just a serpent swallowing its tail, as Freud might have said. Serendipity needs unlikely collisions and discoveries, but it also needs something to anchor those discoveries. Otherwise, your ideas are like carbon atoms randomly colliding with other atoms in the primordial soup, without ever forming the rings and lattice of organic life. The challenge, of course, is how to create environments that foster these serendipitous connections on all the appropriate scales in the private space of your own mind, within larger institutions and across the information networks of society itself. At first blush, the idea of conjuring up serendipitous discoveries inside your own mind seems like a contradiction in terms. Wouldn't that be like losing your bearings in your own driveway? Yeah, yet that's exactly what Kikul was doing by the fire. He was connecting two distinct thoughts that each occupied a slot in his memory banks. The riddle of benzene's molecular molecular structure, and the tail swallowing Ouroboros. The truth is, your mind contains a near infinite number of ideas and memories that at any given moment are lurking outside your consciousness. Some tiny fraction of those those uh, thoughts those thoughts are like Kekel's serpent, surprising connections that might help you unlock a door in the adjacent possible. But how do you get those particular clusters of neurons to fire at the right time? One way is to go for a walk. The history of innovation is replete with stories of good ideas that occurred to people while they were out on a stroll. A similar phenomenon occurs with long showers or soaks in a tub. In fact, the original Eureka moment are Archimedes hitting upon a way of measuring the volume of irregular shapes occurred in a bathtub. The shower or stroll removes you from the task based focus of modern life, paying bills, answering email, helping kids with homework, and deposits you in a more associative state. Given enough time, your mind will often stumble across some old connection that it had long overlooked, and you experience that delightful feeling of private serendipity. Why didn't I think of that before? In his book, the Foundations of Science, the French mathematician and physicist Henry Poincaré devotes an autobiographical chapter to the question of mathematical creativity. The chapter begins with a detailed account of how Poincaré discovered the class of function functions. One of the first influential mathematical concepts of his career. He begins by attempting to prove that the functions do not exist. For 15 days, he struggles at his desk with no success. Then one evening, he breaks from his ordinary ordin, ordinary routine and drinks black coffee. Unable to sleep, his mind seethes with promising hints. Ideas rose in Croats Point Care writes. I felt them. I Croats Point Care writes. I felt them called until pairs interlocked, so to speak, making a stable combination. By the next morning, I had established the existence of a class of functions, those which come from the hypergeometric series. His next inside the connection between the functions and non Euclidean geometry comes several weeks later while boarding a bus during a geological expedition in Normandy. On his return home, he commences work on an unrelated arithmetical question and flounders for several days. This disgusted with my failure, he writes. I went to spend a few days at the seaside and thought of something else. One morning, walking on the bluff, the idea came to me with just the same characteristics of brevity, suddenness, and immediate certainty that the arithmetic transformations of indeterminate ternary quadratic forms were identical with those of non-Euclidean geometry. He returns home again and works through the implications, but encounters another roadblock. Military service then dictates a trip to Fort Valerian in the suburbs of Paris, where he has little time to think about mathematics at all, and yet the final missing piece arrives nonetheless. One day, going along the street, the solution of the difficulty which had stopped me suddenly appeared to me. I did not try to go deep into it immediately, and only after my service did I again take up the question. I had all the elements and had only to arrange them and put them together. So I wrote out my final memoir at a single stroke and without difficulty. Poincaré's account may be the most pedestrian story of scientific creativity on record. Whenever he actually sits down at his desk, the innovations seem to grind to a halt. But on foot, his ideas rose in crowds, trying to explain the phenomenon. Poincaré reaches for an atomic metaphor with each partial idea or hunch represented by an atom hooked to a wall. In normal situations, the atoms remain in place, locked into a stable configuration. But when the mind wanders, and in Poincaré's case, when the physical body wanders, the atoms become untethered. During a period of apparent rest and unconscious work, certain of them are detached from the wall and put in motion. They flash in every direction through the space where they are enclosed, as would for example a swarm of gnats, or if you prefer a more learned comparison, like the molecules of gas in the kinematic theory of gases. Then their mutual impacts may produce new combinations, while the creative work can produce new serendipitous combinations of existing ideas in our heads. We can also cultivate serendipity in the way that we absorb new ideas from the outside world. Reading remains an unsurpassed vehicle for the transmission of interesting new ideas and perspectives. But those of us who aren't scholars or scholars or involved in the publishing business are only able to block out time to read around the edges of our work schedule. Listening to an audiobook during the morning commute, or taking in a chapter after the kids are down. The problem with assimilating new ideas at the fringe of your daily routine is that the potential combinations are limited by the reach of your memory. If it takes you 2 weeks to finish a book by the time you get to the next book, you have forgotten much of what was so interesting or provocative about the original one. You can immerse yourself in a single author's perspective, but then it's harder to create serendipitous collisions between the ideas of multiple authors. One way around this limitation is to carve out dedicated periods where you read a large and varied collection of books and essays in a condensed amount of time. Bill Gates and his successor at Microsoft, Ray Ozzie, are famous for taking annual reading vacations. During the year, they deliberately cultivate a stack of reading materials, much of it unrelated to their day-to-day focus at Microsoft, and then they take off for a week or two and do a deep dive into the words that they have stockpiled. By compressing their intake into a matter of days, they give new ideas additional opportunities to network among themselves, for the simple reason that it's easier to remember something that you read yesterday than it is to remember something you read 6 months ago. In Poincare's language, the deep dive, like the long stroll, detach the atoms from the wall and puts them in motion. Most of Most of us don't have the luxury of taking deep dive reading sabbaticals, of course, and reading a few thousands pages is not everyone's idea of a fun vacation. But there's no reason why organizations couldn't recognize the value of a reading sabbatical the way many organizations encourage their employees to take time off for learning new skills. If Google can give its engineers one day a week to work to week one day a week to work on anything they want, surely other organizations can figure out a way to give their employees dedicated time to immerse themselves in a network of new ideas. Private serendipity can be cultivated by technology as well. For more than a decade now, I have been creating a private digital archive of quotes that I've found intriguing intri- intriguing my 21st century version of the commonplace book. Some of these passages involve very focused research on a specific project. Others are more random discoveries, hunts waiting to make a connection. Some of them are passages that I've transcribed from books or articles. Others were clipped directly from web pages. In the past few years, thanks to Google Books and the Kindle, copying and storing interesting quotes from a book has grown far simpler. I keep all of these quotes in a database using a program called Devon Think, where I also store my own writing, chapters, essays, blog posts, notes, and by combining my own words with passages from other sources, the collection becomes something more than just a file storage system. It becomes a digital extension of my imperfect memory, an archive of all my old ideas and the ideas that have influenced me. There are now more than 5,000 distinct entries in that database, and more than 3 million words, 60 books worth of quotes, fragments, and hunts, all individually captured by me, stored in a single database. Having all of that information available at my fingertips is not just a quantitative matter of finding my notes faster. Yes, when I'm trying to track down an article I wrote I wrote many years ago, it's now much easier to retrieve. But the qualitative change lies elsewhere in finding documents that I've forgotten about altogether. Finding documents that I didn't know I was looking for. What makes the system truly powerful is the way that it fosters private serendipity.